I just want to give you a heads up that the signal wasn't good when I recorded this episode and the sound is a little wobbly at times, but Bonnie's story is too important not to share.
Welcome to another episode of Heal Yourself with me, Sarah Dawkins. We are the podcast that shares real people healing real problems by themselves without pharmaceuticals. And today we have Bonnie. Bonnie grew up in a small conservative Mennonite county in Northern California. Her family left the community when she was 14, but they still held on to some of the same cultural beliefs for many years. Bonnie's journey for healing began when she left home at 20 and started searching for herself and her own beliefs. She moved to a remote county in California, and this is where she met the love of her life and married him. And she is now raising 4 wild, strong boys. And now she tends to the physical and emotional hurts of her little children, but also serves her family and friends as a holistic health practitioner. So welcome to the show, Bonnie.
Thank you. The city I grew up in was a very tight-knit community, very strict religiously, and so there was a lot of physical abuse in the school that I went to as a child, and for years I blamed myself for that, because I was always told, like, you're just not, I just wasn't obeying the rules, or I just wasn't good enough, or whatever the reason was. I don't now I look back and I'm like, okay, those were silly reasons to discipline somebody. But as a teen, I would complain about what happened to me, and a lot of times just regretted. And I started to just feel like, oh, I just complain too much. I just need to let it go. And I took a lot of the responsibility onto myself of what me. And that's just really not healthy at all. If someone is in an abusive situation, I realized a lot of people take on the responsibility like they weren't good enough, or they just need to try harder to be a better person. And I didn't even look at the things that happened to me as abuse. I just saw them as discipline, and it's what shaped me. And I even would tell people, yeah, I'm glad that I went through that, because it helped shape me, and it did to a certain extent, but that doesn't make it right. But yeah, it was after becoming an adult, and I actually talked to someone who was really close to me and went through all of pretty much the same things in our childhood. And she said to me one time, she was like, don't you think what happened to us was abusive? And I'm like, yeah, but nobody seems to care or listen. And she's like, yeah, I think it was abusive. It was actually very abusive. It wasn't just done. So with that, I did start to talk to more people about it and confirm it in my own mind that what happened wasn't right. And I started to think about talking about it publicly and sharing my story publicly, because I just wanted to bring awareness to a lot of my friends didn't even know I grew up in this community. They were shocked to find out that I had grown up that way. So before I wanted to come out about it, someone close to me advised me, suggested that I don't do that, because it would make other people who weren't responsible for that situation. And so I backed off and I didn't talk about it publicly for till this past year. So about 7 years later. And in that, I still, like, I went back into, like, taking responsibility for it again. And thinking, like, oh, I didn't, like, it wasn't these people's fault that this happened. It was my fault because it's just, it was just discipline and I just need to get over it. And, but this past year, I went through a lot of healing. So with the health coach, I realized I needed a lot more help than I had ever realized before. But she really helped me to realize that I was hurt, a lot of hurt, and I am pulling it on to myself. And like, what would you do if you could go back? What would you tell that little who was in that school and going through that? The one thing I just knew that I would tell her is, I will listen to you. Like, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I hear that you've been hurt and it wasn't right that you were hurt. And after that, that's when I shared my story publicly, because I just realized that I couldn't hold on to it anymore. I was just piling on myself. And when I shared that story on Facebook, I had a lot of people private message me and tell me thank you, because they had also gone through that. And that's when I really realized that it wasn't right for me. Like, I took other people's responsibility and I put it on myself. And yeah, I realized I can't make excuses for other people's actions. Like, I can only take responsibility for my own. And so with that, I started to work through that and realized I had to forgive, which was really hard to figure out what that definition was. And so, yeah, that was the hardest part, was just figuring out how to actually forgive people. But I don't know, I have, and I've released a lot of it, talking about it and bringing awareness in a way that's not like, I don't wish, like, bad on anybody. I just want to let it go. I just want to move on with my life and not have to, like, have that on me anymore. And it's really, really helped that there's people out there that believe my story. That has been really healing for me, to know that I'm not wrong. And yeah,
you were
just releasing that.
You were just a child in that community. And as that child, you wouldn't have known what was right and what was wrong, because you were being led by the adults. So you would believe at the time, as that child, that the adults were doing what was right, therefore you must have been doing what was wrong. And all the time, if that's the belief within that community, that that's how children should be treated, then you would have, it's easy to see how you can accept that and hold that as your own, that you were the child that was in the wrong, because the adults were telling you and punishing you for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're not alone in what you went through. And is that the belief of the community, do you think, of how children should be raised?
Oh, yes, because this religion has been around for 400 to 500 years. So it's very out of date as far as how people should conduct their lives. And so that was hard on me too, because part of me, like, I didn't want to blame my teachers and stuff for punishing me this way because it's just been on for 100 years. So
I think it's like it's customary, and if it's custom and practice, it's passed on through the generations. And if it's what your parents have done, your grandparents have done, their grandparents have done, it will just be deemed as normal. And especially if it's a tight-knit community, you won't be able to see outside of that as to
Right.
how other children are being raised and how other parents are acting in that parental role.
Right. Yeah. Like I did have a teacher that he did get taken away or something. Like I never really knew what happened. I found out from her just talking that like I think he had been doing like a lot of inappropriate things with the teenage girls, and so so they finally did take a like action towards that. Like it never really got fixed in my mind.
Yeah.
I still like I was a bad child. Like I was just a bad child. And so I just always was like, man, I don't know why I just like I'm so bad. I can't like seem to get better. And that really makes me sad to think that there's like still people in that are like they still think that way, because I just know how heavy that was in my own mind and my own heart. And so to know that there's still like people out there who went through the same exact thing. So that's why I was like, I have to share.
Yes, because I think it's easier as well once you know somebody else who's been through the same or very similar things. You know you're not alone, and that knowing that other people have been there and being heard, as you said, what would you tell that small child that I hear you? Because it sounds like you weren't heard as that child. You just assumed that what people was telling you was the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've mentioned that you've done some forgiveness work, Bonnie. What other types of healing have you felt the need to do around your childhood?
Yeah, with the forgiveness comes like just moving on. Being in the present has been really, really helpful.
Yes, and grounding you, being in that present moment as well in life.
Yeah.
That's a huge weight to hold for so long, Bonnie, and your life must have changed quite radically after you've done some forgiveness and healing work to be able to move on in your own life, knowing that you're not a bad person, that you are lovable, you are wonderful.
Yes, I had to rebel to have freedom. So I had to be rebellious. I had to be rebellious to move on with my life and to be considered like a normal life. And it's sad. It saddens that they don't like to see that in me. But on the other hand, I've found so much peace and freedom to live my own life. And to be rebellious,
Yeah, and I suppose as well, finding that freedom makes it's so much more valuable from what you've been through to what you've got now.
Oh yeah, totally. I can cry talking about freedom. When I talk to my kids about being free and being who they want to be, and it makes me cry sometimes. I want my kids to know themselves and to be free in knowing themselves. And I just watch my kids. They're still little. I watch them and I'm just like, wow, they have no idea how some kids are how I lived my life growing up in this, like, there's a rule for everything and being afraid all the time. It's not fun. You're just afraid all the time of getting in trouble for breaking a rule. And because I grew up with, and my kids have a hard time understanding this, but I grew up with no television, no radio, like absolutely could not listen to music, you know, and now I tell my kids that, and like they have a really hard time understanding how someone can live without TV. And but yeah, I love watching my kids grow up in this life where they're free to be themselves and they're free to be normal. And that's brought a lot of healing to me too, just watching family grow, flourish in this wild environment.
Yeah, and I suppose to be spontaneous as well, and to experiment and just to try things, to be able to see, you know, what they're good at and what works for them and what they don't like, rather than like you said, the strict and rigid discipline with the rules.
Yeah. I mean, it was to like colors of my clothes were, you know, picked out for me, you know, and now I'm like, my kids can just wear whatever they want, and I mean, to a certain extent, I guess, but but yeah, it's just a beautiful thing to see people just living their life how they want to live their life.
Free.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Bonnie, thank you for sharing that with us, because it's not easy to start speaking about it, but as you said, it is helping you further on your healing as well, because it's bringing other people to you who have been through the same or very similar things. Could you share one small thing that the listeners could take away with them today on their own healing journey, something that's helped you on yours?
Okay. Find something every day to be grateful for. There's so much that we can pick apart in our lives, no matter how we were raised or what our circumstances are. I mean, I love to talk about how beautiful my life is now, and there's a lot of good things, but there's still a lot of things that happen to me that I could complain about and I want to complain about, but I just feel like to continue healing, to continue being stronger, I have to find the things that I'm actually grateful for. And so, yeah, gratefulness is something I kind of obsess over.
And I love that, because gratitude helped me through my dark times as well. And it doesn't have to be for the really big things, does it? You know, it can be just like, oh, there's a tiny bit of blue in the grey sky and the flowers are breaking through, or I've just heard children laughing, or I've got a really good cup of coffee, or I've had this wonderful meal, great conversation. It's all those little things to have gratitude for, and acknowledge that they are a part of your life and see them.
Totally.
Fabulous. And Bonnie, where can people find you? Do you have a website, on social media?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook. My handle on Instagram is Sagebrush and Kids, and Facebook is Bonnie Madrigal.
I'll share that as well in the text. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Bonnie, and thank you so much for having the confidence to speak out, because your journey will help so many other people. Thank you.